God, we are so thankful to be here this morning. Lord, thank you for the message that was preached to us this morning about peace, God, and how you bring peace into our lives, God, and that Satan wants nothing more than to steal and kill and destroy. But you've come, as we're going to talk about this morning, God, to take that punishment for us. So we just ask that you be with us. Speak the words that you want to speak this morning. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I want to start by just telling you a story. All right, who likes stories?
I do.
Okay, all right. This is a story about a little boy and a little girl. This boy's name is Johnny, and the girl's name is Mary. Okay, they're siblings. And Johnny, a couple of years prior, had this rare disease that he was healed from. And then now his sister has the same exact disease that he had. Okay, and she is going to die if she doesn't get a blood transfusion. Okay, and since her brother Johnny had the same disease and has the same rare blood type that Mary has, he's like a perfect donor for this blood transfusion, right? So the doctor goes in and says to Johnny, hey Johnny, would you be willing to give a blood transfusion, give your blood for your sister so that she can potentially and hopefully be saved from the illness, the disease that she has? And so he thought about it for a minute, and with a quivering lip, he says, okay, yes, for my sister, I'll do that. And so as Johnny and Mary are getting wheeled into the room where this blood transfusion is going to happen, Johnny looks over at his sister and gives her a little smile, but you can tell he's nervous. But he's healthy, he's strong, and you can see that she is pale and weak and really in need of this blood transfusion. And so, but he looks over and he smiles at his sister. And so as the blood starts traveling through the IV from him to her, he breaks the silence and says to the doctor, all right, doctor, so when am I going to die? Right, so this little boy, see, that's why it was so difficult for him to make that decision, but he said, you know what, for my sister, I'm willing to do that. But the doctor's like, no, you're not going to die. You're just going to share your blood. You're going to give some of your blood, not all of your blood, to your sister so that she can live. So see, what we're going to talk about today is similar to that, right? We're going to talk about atonement. All right, it's a big word. Who knows what the word atonement means? Oliver.
It means paid for.
Paid for, yeah. So in your book, or in your notes, the first blank there is payment for sin. All right, we talked several weeks ago about how Adam was our federal head, or federal headship was in Adam. Therefore, the sin that was brought into the world by Adam is transferred down to us. So we are sinful. And so our sin needs a payment. And so why is atonement necessary? Your next note is, why is atonement necessary? It's because living in our sin would lead to death. Who knows Romans 6:23? Just even the first little bit of it. I always get my Romans 3:23, 6. We got all those kind of confused a little bit, but Romans 6:23, the very beginning of it says, for the wages of sin is death. So that's why atonement is necessary, right? Our sin brings about death, which needs a payment. All right? We've all heard our parents tell us that our choices have consequences, right? If you do something that goes against what your parents say, there's a consequence to that. And that's what we're talking about here, is that because of our sin, the consequence is death. So the next part of your notes has a bunch of blanks. And the word that's in there, does anybody think they can take a guess at what that word is? It's going to be the same word in each one. God is the only blank being.
Human. Perfect. Awesome.
Hey, there's a lot of good answers that are right, but we're looking for eternal. All right? Eternal. Meaning God was there before the world was created, right? He created the world. God is the only eternal being. So our sin, therefore, is against an eternal God. And therefore, then, our sin requires or needs an eternal payment. And only God can pay for my eternal sin because only God is eternal. And look what it says underneath there. This is a little cheat for ahead of time. Jesus is fully God, right? Okay. Well, then the next section talks about who we are, right? I am what am I? Am I eternal? No. I'm human. Yeah, that's the word we're looking for. I am human. Therefore, my sin is human. My human sin must be paid for. And then only a human can pay for my human sin, right? And then look at that down there. Jesus is fully human. Right? So, again, our sin is against an eternal God. Jesus is eternal. Our sin, though, is human sin. It needs to be paid for by a human, and Jesus is fully God and fully man, right? Human. So we're going to look at atonement. I know it's a big word, but again, it means payment for sin. We're going to look at a couple other bigger words. Penal substitutionary atonement.
Wow.
Look at that. Penal is not like a big word, but it's a weird word that we don't typically use that often. Who knows what the word penal means?
Jail.
Jail, penalty. Yeah, penalty. It's if you just put a T and a Y on the end of that, right? So that's an easy way to remember what penal means. It means penalty, or it means punishment. All right, I love a good sports analogy because I love sports. If you also love sports, you're going to catch on to this real easily. Even if you don't, you probably understand how sports work. But even if you think about hockey, right? There's even a penalty box in hockey. If you do something that goes against the rules of the league, right? There's a ref out there that's going to blow the whistle and give you a penalty. Right? Sometimes in hockey, it's a severe enough penalty that you need to take a break into a penalty box. So like with sports, any sport, you can think of any sport. Soccer, there's actually a penalty box. If you do something to cause like an infraction, you do something wrong, touch the ball with your hands, tackle somebody the wrong way, inside that penalty box, it's rewarded with a penalty kick. Right? Even just an infraction outside of that penalty box is still rewarded to the other team as some sort of an advantage. So there is some sort of payment that must be made for that punishment. Okay, this is a big word, but it's not too difficult. Substitutionary. Who can tell me what substitutionary means? How? Yeah, like a substitute teacher, right? Somebody that comes in that's different, right? It's taking the place for someone else. So yeah, if you have a substitute teacher, because your teacher couldn't make it that day, you have somebody else that comes in to take the place of that teacher. Again, with sports, there's substitutions in a game of sports. So if I'm playing basketball and I'm sitting on the bench, I love the idea of substitution, right? Because I want to get into the game. If I'm in the game, I don't love to see somebody sitting at the scorer's table because I'm like, oh man, I might have to come out of the game. But this is a crazy situation here where we are the ones that caused this sin or this infraction that demands payment, and God's basically like the coach, and he's going to send Jesus in to be your substitution for that punishment. Okay, so that's what substitutionary means, is taking the place for someone else. All right, so I'm going to talk about a couple of things that, you see the cross in the middle there, but a couple of things that happen on the cross. The first is that Jesus takes our place. All right, Jesus died in our place, right? Taking our sin on himself, paying the penalty that we deserve to pay, right? This is what that penal substitutionary atonement means. We talked a couple weeks ago about our sin nature and how, we deserve death, but Jesus paid that penalty for us. Galatians 3:13 says that Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Think about that. He became a curse for us. He redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. See, Jesus died in our place that we might become the righteousness of God. I'm also going to read Isaiah 53, 4 through 6. Isaiah 53, 4 through 6. Listen and see if you can just pick out this idea that Christ was our payment for the sin, that he died in our place. It says, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that the punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us have turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So that's that idea of penal substitutionary atonement, right? Jesus took our place. It says in that verse 5 that he's getting what we deserved, right? He took our sin on him, bore our sorrows. God put on Jesus the sins of you and me. So that brings us to why does it matter? Why is it necessary? Why does penal substitution matter? Why does it matter? Because our sin needs to be dealt with if God is just. So I heard somebody say when I was asking earlier, the blank for God is, somebody said just. Yes, God is a just God. Therefore, because we sin, it's like your parent saying, "Hey, if you do this, this is the penalty, this is the punishment," and if they don't follow through on it, that's not just, right? God is a perfectly just God, and therefore, that's why penal substitution matters. It matters because God is a just God, right? It's I just want to go real quickly. The second thing, not only just that he took our place on the cross, the other thing that happened on the cross is that Christ satisfied the demand, that's this just part, the demand that of God's just judgment against our sin through his death on the cross. Christ satisfied that. A lot of times, there's another, I'll get to that in a minute. Never mind. But here's an example for that. If you're on vacation with your family and you go out to dinner and say you order a steak and you order it cooked in a particular way, right? A lot of times they'll bring that steak out to you and say, how does that look? Does that look like what you required? Is that what you asked for? Is that what you have demanded or required? And so that's basically like it's you looking at that steak and saying, yes, that is exactly what I demanded. That's just like God saying, hey, this is the requirement, this is what I've demanded, and this is the only way that it's going to work is if Jesus pays that price. Jesus met the Father's requirement, right? And so that another big word for today is, it's not in your notes, I don't think, but it's this idea of propitiation. All right, that's, who knows what that means? David does. David, what does it mean?
I have a mental trick that I can't say out loud.
Basically means that the Father, meeting the requirement of the Father. So refers to the Father being satisfied by Christ's death on the cross for you and for my sin fully. Right? It means that since Jesus died for you and for me, there's no other, anything else necessary. No further punishment is necessary. Christ has fully met that. that demand. So, the last thing you need to know, why does the resurrection matter? Why does the resurrection matter? So, like the empty tomb, why does that matter? Who wants to answer that? Anybody? Yeah.
Like it's a sign that it actually happened.
Yeah, it's good. It's a sign that, like, it's almost like you bought that steak and you were to pay for it. Like, the worst thing is to use a card and it to get declined, right? Like, sometimes that happens with my church card because I spend too much for church. But sometimes I'll get my card, you try to use it and it'll be like, declined or insufficient funds or whatever, and it's like, that's the worst. The empty tomb is basically like that, you using that card and it's saying approved, right? Like, that's the greatest thing. Like, sweet. That payment it went through, right? That's what the empty cross is, or the empty tomb is. The empty tomb is that picture of that it's approved, that God is satisfied fully by Jesus' death and resurrection. So, we talked about some big words. And for your parents, I would love to give a recommendation of a book that I've really loved in dealing with either my kids or in ministry. But there's a book called Big Truths for Young Hearts. All right, it's a good book. Big Truths for Young Hearts talks all about all this kinds of stuff. And it makes it a little bit easier for me and younger people to understand some of these big words. But they talked about in there that I stole a line from it, is what I'm going to kind of end with, about how we went over a lot of big words today. But it says, we talked about some big words today, but these are big truths about a big Savior with big grace from a big God for big sin. All right, these are big truths. Yeah, these words are big, but once we start to understand them, we get to start to understand how much God loves us. Right? We get to see who we are in Him, how we are saved fully from God's wrath by Jesus' death on the cross for us in that empty